So I'd really like to move on to the area of nutrition now and food. And, it can be such a complex area for those of us who are trying to manage our bodies. How do we navigate this whole world of there's this great sea of advice out there about what we should do, what we should eat. And it can be quite complex for many of us. But I'm just curious to hear from both of you. Has this been an area that you've investigated through your pain journey? And yeah, what's been some of the processes that you've been through in this area? So, how about you, first of all, Kareem?
Yeah, so as you said, the sea of recommendations and diets and things, I was swimming in that sea for quite a few years. Um, and I've always had a interesting relationship with eating. I'm quite extreme in my eating habits. So, when the tub of ice cream is opened, it's usually finished. And when the pizza is ordered, there's none for the morning after. So I tried a whole bunch of different kind of fad diets to see what would help. There was one that my wife, and again, we talked about treatment fatigue in the last conversation. I think it's very similar with advice like this, oh, try this diet, try this supplement, try this wonderful new, potion that worked for my uncle or my friend or whoever. So just remaining kind of patient and calm and accepting and open to that advice is hard enough in and of itself. But I think the awareness practice helped with that. There was one diet that my wife encouraged me to try called the autoimmune protocol, which was quite interesting. It's kind of paleo style diet, very, very restrictive. And the idea is that you go off, almost everything for at least 40 days to give it a try. Some people go up to 3 months or 6 months, and then you very slowly reintroduce, one by one. So I think there's various diets like this. And it was helpful in that my inflammation went down quite a bit when I was doing it. And then I found actually a few food types that I don't think I would have known weren't reacting very well with the system, were causing a bit of inflammation. And they were weird things like eggplant. So once I brought eggplant aubergine back in, it was not very pleasant. Cashew
So,
nut.
so can I just ask you a question? How did you know that they caused inflammation? What was the sign for you?
Yeah, so the nice thing about that diet, when you cut them out and then reintroduce them only one at a time, so you don't have a meal that has,
Hmm.
10 different new ingredients and you're literally trying it one by one. And I would get, for me, it was kind of, it felt as if the tissue itself was inflaming, and then that was putting pressure on the nerves, and then I would get the nerve pains that I'd get very badly in the lower legs. It wasn't sciatica, it was on the inside of the legs, which is wouldn't wish this upon anyone, but right in the inner thigh and all the way down the inner thigh there. So it would cause that kind of that inflammation of tissue and that stimulation of the nerves, which was very unpleasant for me. So that was helpful, and I did stick to keeping those things out or very, very low in the diet, the items that were found to be
And how
inflammatory.
how many items did you
Uh,
find were problematic?
Yeah, so I discovered previously that meat was problematic for me, so I'd already cut out meat. I still have a bit of fish in my diet. The way I describe it to people is, and I'm not very religious about it, but I just don't eat anything that's farmed. So if it's
Mhm.
farmed, whether it's fish or land animals, I'm not interested. I've done a lot of work in agri business, so I've kind of seen what's going on there, and I don't think it's very pleasant. So nothing farmed, a little bit of fish, and I think the meat had already helped a great deal in reducing the inflammation and just giving me more energy and making me happier, if I'm honest.
Mm.
And I do notice it because, as I said, I'm not religious about it. So if my daughter can't finish her pepperoni pizza, I'd rather eat it than waste it. So I'll eat that. But I do notice the odd times that I have meat, that it's not just a physical kind of downgrade, but also a mental one and an emotional one. I just don't don't,
Mhm.
don't feel very happy, which we could get into, I guess, a whole different conversation about. So meat I've kept out, eggplant I've kept out. There's a few nuts that I don't take anymore. Um, I think those are the kind of the main things. The things that I know inflame me are gluten, dairy, and sugar. Those are much, much, much harder to
Mm.
kind of eliminate. So I try and keep them low. And we're doing the program now, and we're looking at diet, and it's been really helpful to be a bit more mindful about the intake of those three things. But there is one thing I really wanted to talk about, which has helped me more than anything else, and that's kind of syncing my eating and drinking window with my biological clock, so with the circadian clock. It's called time restricted eating. It's not intermittent fasting. I think it's really, really important to say that. You don't actually have to skip any meals. It's all about keeping your eating and drinking window, except for water. Water you can have any time, but any non-water drink or any food, keeping the window to ideally 10 hours, 9, 10 hours, but kind of not going over 12. Because once, and this is based on a lot of really good research. There's a doctor called Dr. Sachin Panda out of the Salk Institute in the US, which is the world's top biological science research center. And he's written a book called The Circadian Code, and a lot of this is based on his and his team's work. But they found that there's a master clock, what they call the master oscillator in our brain. It's a bunch of cells that controls the circadian rhythm for the whole body. And that is activated by blue light. And it was funny because they had a theory that it was activated by blue light, but then they found that blind people could still keep their rhythm, their natural circadian rhythm.
Interesting.
Yeah, really interesting. So then they started looking around. Are the receptors in the skin, in the hair? Where are these blue light receptors? They couldn't find them. Then they saw that people who lost their eyes, so veterans, people who lost their eyes in accidents and no longer had those organs, they could not keep their circadian rhythm, and they would actually drift about 20 or 30 minutes every day, because it's not 24 hours, the circadian rhythm, about 24 hours and 30 minutes or so. So if no one tells them the time, after a few weeks, they're completely off. So they came back to the eyes, and they actually found that those cells are in the eyes, but they're not related to sight. So even if you're blind, you still have those receptors.
Yes. Yes.
Now, the reason it is connected to the eating and the nutrition is because every organ in the body actually has a secondary clock. So a bunch of cells that control that organ's circadian rhythm. And for almost all the organs in the body, it's switched on by digestion. So that first non-water bite you have in the morning will switch on your clock for the day, and then all those organs are set to daytime operations. So insulin regulation, enzyme production, a lot of other metabolic processes are set on, and they will go off after 12 hours and 20 minutes, irrespective of whether you keep on eating.
So for example, if you have your first non-water input at say 8 in the morning, 8:30 at night, the body's ready for a kind of, okay, no more today, thanks very much.
No more today. So it switches to regeneration mode, repair, the flora in the gut, that's nighttime flora activates, the daytime flora goes to sleep. So if you continue to ingest food and anything except water after that period of time, you're doing yourself a real disservice. You can damage the organs, and over a long period of time that can cause a lot of chronic illnesses as well. So the research into circadian rhythm and diet is actually because there's a huge number of night shift workers, everyone from frontline workers, but factories, supermarkets, logistics, etc. And the incidence of chronic illness in night shift workers, cancer, heart disease, obesity, etc., is multiples of day shift workers. So they're trying to do some research, see how can we help this huge number of people who keep our economies and our countries going, without them getting sick. So it's really, really interesting to see the incidence of illness in people that do eat and drink at all hours of the day. But for me, I would have something very early before I started this diet, maybe 7 a.m., and then I'd still be grazing at 9 or 10, as we do, walking to the kitchen and just opening the cabinets. So cutting that out. And I'm not super militant about it. I do this 5 days a week. I usually have a couple of
well, see, I think that's a very interesting point in terms of one of the things I'm very interested in is behavior, because obviously a lot of us, we kind of know more or less what we should be doing, but we just find it very hard to do. And it sounds like from what you've said that you enjoy your food. If there's a tub of ice cream out, then that's quite a difficult thing to resist. And I think we can also do comfort eating when we've got health conditions, we're feeling low and depressed, and so the ice cream looks even more attractive. So what you've said there is very interesting to me, that you give yourself 2 days off, because I think as the sort of psychology of it all, if we think I've got to be really, really strict 7 days a week, then we can react.
Yes, no, absolutely.
So that's very interesting. 5 days. So just to reiterate the actual process? Because I know there's another whole model, which I think is the intermittent fasting, where
Yeah.
people say you should have like 12 to 15 hours a day not eating. But
Mhm.
this one's no more than 12, is that right? Between 10 and 12.
Correct. No more than 12. The optimum results are around the 9, 10 hour mark. So if you keep it around there, you'll get the best benefits
So
from it.
that means, just again, let's just unpack that. So say the last bit of food you eat is 8 p.m.
Mhm.
So then when would you eat again in the morning?
So it's more important to say when did you have your first bite in the morning. So let's say if I have my first bite at 10 a.m.,
Yeah.
then I can go until 8 p.m., even 9 p.m. So have a proper dinner, maybe have a little snack. But by 8 or 9 p.m., I'm done. Ideally, it's by 8 p.m.
Oh, I see. So you eat within a 10-hour window.
You eat within a
I
10
see.
hour
Okay.
window, and then you don't eat for 12 to 16 hours, depending
I
on
see.
how
I
long you.
see. Okay. So it is still this kind of not eating for 12,
It is. It's
at least
similar.
12 hours. Is that
It's
right?
very
Am I
similar.
just getting the maths right? So if you only eat within, is it 10 hours max or 12
Yeah.
hours max? 10 hours
10, well,
max.
well, 12. Don't go over 12. Aim for 10.
Okay. So that means you don't eat for 12 to 14.
Correct.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, so that is a bit. So that's good because that's similar to the intermittent eating that people talk about.
On the
In
behavior
terms of the
change,
hours, yeah,
on the behavior change point, one of the reasons that I really like the research that's been done in this area and what's been written about it is that even when they were working with mice in the laboratory, they've long since moved on to humans, but when they were working with mice in the laboratory, even the mice, they gave them 2 cheat days because they wanted this to be
interesting.
something that could, they wanted it to be something that could be
Yeah.
applied practically. They know that we have evening events or we have social stuff on the weekends, so they're giving you a chance of all the benefits that have been discovered related to this approach. It's okay to take those cheat days, which I
Okay, I
think.
think that's a really great thing for people to hear, and it's interesting because I did go to a functional medicine person about a year ago, and she got me doing this just 2 days a week. This kind of having this 14-hour window, and I think that was very skillful because I've got a history in the interview I did with Sophie and Stan. I talk about being quite anorexic in my 20s, which
Mm,
was a reaction to my body. I hated my body. I wanted to sort of starve it into submission. So I think she was very skillful that she looked at me and my psychology and my personality, thought, no, this woman doesn't need to have really sort of strict
mm,
regime of fasting. A couple of days a week would be good for her. So I thought that was quite brilliant, and
good.
I,
And you can
I did
always
it with
start with the day, can't you? Like a meatless Monday, you can do.
exactly. So we have to work with our personality and our psyche. Yeah, yeah. So brilliant. So Tom, have you had any experience of this kind of what do you call it, Kareem? Is it
Circadian rhythm. Yeah.
circadian rhythm eating?
Or time restricted eating is how
Time
they say.
restricted eating. Thank you. Yeah.
I have, but kind of through doing the restricted time window eating. So, um, I guess my two primary reasons for getting interested in diet and changing it were first off for the pain, because a lot of my pain is in the knees and the hips. Apparently, I heard some fact about how for every extra kilo you're carrying, it's actually 3 kilos of torsion.
Mm.
Okay.
Because it's
Yes.
a dynamically moving joint, and so that terrified me right at the beginning of my sort of pain journey. I thought, okay, because what had been happening is I'd been very fit in my early 20s, doing a lot of cycling, a lot of swimming. I've never been into team sports. We'll get into the exercise later on, I know. But what happened as soon as I had the pain, I couldn't really do
Hmm.
as much exercise. I was working in an incredibly sedentary job. And so I started to gain weight quite quickly. And it felt that the only way I could really control that was through diet. Um, and so for me, the first thing I did was, and I've already mentioned Michael Mosley in this conversation, him talking about mindfulness, the same series of Horizon on the BBC where Michael Mosley introduced me anyway to the idea of mindfulness. And I think you were on that program now that I'm remembering it, Vidyamala. The second program or the third program he did in that series was about diet, and he introduced everyone to the 5-2 diet. And for a long time, that really worked for
Could you
me.
just say what the 5-2 diet is? Yeah.
So the 5-2 diet is basically restricted eating, so eating, it was originally 600 calories a day. Now it's 800 calories for 2 days a week. I actually found it much easier when I was doing 3 days a week, because I'd have an eating day, and not eating as much day, eating day, not eating as much day, and it kind of, your stomach seems to get used to that. But it's a very difficult thing to get used to. The first 2 or 3 weeks are hell, because you're so hungry and you're so not used to being hungry. And the benefits for that, supposedly, are that you lower the amount of IGF-1 in your body, which is an insulin growth factor hormone. The guy that discovered this, I think he's an Italian researcher, and he'd been studying a group of people in South America who had a unique gene that meant they didn't grow much taller than about 3.5 feet tall, but they were living into their 90s and 100 and beyond.
Wow.
Even though they lived very unhealthy lifestyles. So these people were smoking and eating whatever they wanted and being very unhealthy. And so he thought, well, this is very interesting. There seems to be something to do with longevity here. And he realized that these people with this gene that gave them this condition where they didn't grow that tall were missing IGF-1, the growth factor hormone. And that is a factor in causing cancer and making cancer grow faster and things like that. And he realized through experiments on mice that you could actually make people, you could stop anyone from producing large quantities of it if they stopped eating so much.
Wow.
And so it's kind of known in spiritual traditions that, like, fasting is kind of spiritual, but really it just means it's good for you, and it's survived like as a cultural meme, really. The people who were fasting a little bit every now and then were able to live a bit longer, and so pass on that knowledge. And we've just kind of forgotten about that until the last 10 years, basically. But I do find it very hard to sustain. So I haven't done that for years. I did it for a lot of
This is
of
the
time.
5-2.
5-2. Yeah, I found it really useful when I was in that sedentary job where I was trapped at a desk, essentially, for about 10 years. And I probably, for 2 or 3 years of that, I did the 5-2. And because my energy needs weren't that high, I could get very used to it. So I wouldn't recommend it for somebody who's doing a job that is much more physical. But for me, it's a very mental job. And so the interesting thing that happens for me when I eat less is I actually can concentrate more, which isn't the same for everybody. But I know that this is now counter to the official advice, because there was a study recently that said if you are doing restricted eating, you should focus on morning meals. Whereas for me, what happens is if I eat really early in the morning, my concentration dips. So I've just had to balance it, and I think generally.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think you're raising a really interesting point there, that obviously when we start reading and researching these things, there's such a massive stuff out there, and it can be confusing. And what I'm struck by with both of you is you're very intelligently looking at the research, looking at, what everyone's saying, and then applying it to you in your lives. And we're all unique as well. That's the other thing that science is really showing, is it isn't as if, there is a human digestive system that's sort of standard, but we're all incredibly unique organisms. And so for you've worked out, you need to eat later in the day, whereas for somebody else it might be earlier in the day.
But there's always just this balance of control. So I'm always having this fight with my weight, probably the wrong language to use, but weight management is always difficult because I can't do as much aerobic exercise as I'd like to. And again, this is a controversial one, but the keto diet has been very helpful when in short periods. So if my weight has gone so bad again, wrong words to use, if my weight has become a factor in my health that is not conducive to my most healthy behaviors, to my mood, everything, I've been as high as sort of almost 15, 16 stone. And so when that's happened, the thing that's really worked for me is keto diet, which is a ketogenic diet where you eat something like, you lower your carbohydrate intake to under 30 grams a day. For me, it's different depending on your weight. and you eat more fat. And what happens is your body learns to burn fat
Mm.
instead of carbohydrate. And that's called ketones.
Mm.
It's what they're actually burning. And so it's called the ketogenic diet. Very controversial, like the Atkins was 15, 20 years ago. But for me, it just meant that my weight, I could lose the weight over about a 3-month period. I could lose quite a lot of weight.
So when you lose the weight, because this is also, I think, very interesting for people, you know, what do you do then to keep it off?
I don't, and that's my problem.
Okay.
Do another keto.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like this. I did have an app on my phone, but it deleted the data for some reason when I updated it. But you could see my weight over like 3 years doing this.
Yeah.
I thought this has got to change, but it's trying to figure out what. I think the hidden danger of knowing you can lose the weight once you've done a diet like that is when you come off it, you go, screw it, I can lose it. I know how to lose it now, so I'm just going to eat whatever I want for a bit.
Yes.
So yeah, but I think why keto works for me is because once you're in that keto state, once you're in ketosis and your body's burning fat, as soon as you have like a pizza or a bowl of pasta or something, your body gets kicked out of it and starts shifting back to burning carbohydrates. So you can't have cheat meals. Otherwise you have to start again, and it takes 2 weeks for your body to get into it. And so for me, that like the inability to cheat means it works for me, because otherwise if I try and do just say like, oh, I'm going to do the Mediterranean diet and be consistent, I just won't. I'll have a cheat meal, and then I'll go, okay, well, next day I'll do my diet, so I'll just eat whatever I want today. And then the next day it's like, well, not today, I'm not actually prepared yet.
Yeah, so thank you for being so honest, because I think many people will recognize that psychology, because that's, I think, what's interesting is you know, we probably most of us have got a broad idea of what a sort of reasonable nutrition is, but the kicker is our behavior and our psychology. And so it sounds like, you know, it's a very live area for you, that you've got a little bit of a pattern of up and down. You know, you sort of put on weight, you go on the keto diet, you put on weight. So what do you think could help you stabilize that?
Time
that question right now.
Time restricted eating. As Tom is describing that, I'm thinking, you know, you're describing why this time restricted eating is so good, because it's not about what you eat. You can keep eating exactly the same stuff you're eating, just change when. And the other thing is that what we eat is not always in our control, right? When you leave the house, you are stuck with whatever's available. What is in your control, no matter where you are, is when you eat. So yeah, I'll go on about this all day. I'm such a big advocate of.
And it's also, I mean, my understanding of it, and I might be wrong here, is Michael Mosley, who is a great proponent of the 5-2 diet. I mean, he's a wonderful guy, and if people are listening to this, there's lots of stuff on YouTube and BBC iPlayer and stuff. His series, very, very good. I suppose he's a health journalist, isn't he? I think, and is he a medic? I think he's a medic.
Yeah, he's a doctor that became a documentarian, and then
yes. And he was a big proponent of the 5-2, and I think he's moved on to this time restricted eating, because they're doing similar things effectively, where you're giving your body a rest because in most developed countries we've got a lot of food available, even if you know, I'm very aware of the cost of living crisis and so on right now, but compared to our natural state, you know, where we might go hunting and whatever, we'd sort of kill a beast and eat it, and then we would have a period of time where there wouldn't be readily available food. So the way food is available to us now is very different from what we're kind of evolved for. So this whole idea that you just reduce your input, either through, you know, the 800 calories a day, a few days a week, or I think it's 5 days. Is it 5 days 800, or 5 days eating normally?
5 days eating normally, 2 days 800.
Yeah. And I think this, I know he's done documentaries on this idea of having this window of overnight where you don't have anything, of, you know, 12 to 14 hours. So it's a similar principle. So yeah, so that's your invitation, Tom, from Karim.
I'll definitely try it. I genuinely will, because I love, as you can tell.
Yeah, but also what Karim's saying, that so I think very encouraging people to hear is, with that with that model, you can eat what you like within the 8 hours or 10 hours that you're eating.
You can, and it's
Although presumably it's not ideal to binge, presumably.
no, I mean, yeah, of course, it's not like an invitation to go nuts in the 10-hour window. But what happens is you don't have to reduce any calories. You don't have to change what you eat. But by virtue of stopping a bit earlier in the evening, calories are cut. And I can't remember, they're crowdsourcing a lot of research at the moment. So there's a great app that you can use and you can input your data and they've
Is that
got
the Zoe app?
no, this is Dr. Pandas and his
Oh,
team,
okay. Yeah.
which is, I think it's called, I think if you type in my circadian code, we can find it and maybe stick it in the notes. But there is a 15 to 20% reduction in caloric intake just by virtue of cutting out the evening snacking and grazing, which is a really nice kind of side benefit as well. So there is weight loss, but it gets you to your optimum weight, and then you're not continuing to lose after. So yeah, for anyone who's watching or listening, just check it out.
Yeah, and then I'm also very aware that we have people within our community who are diabetic, things like that. So obviously, you have to take responsibility for whatever your own condition is and manage it. This is just one model that might work for some people. Good. Okay, so it sounds like it's quite a live area for both of you.
Yeah.
But it sounds so Karim, you've expressed very clearly that there are certain foods that kick off your inflammation and your pain. So Tom, you've talked about it in terms of your weight, that when you're heavier, it affects your joints. Are you also aware that like what you eat affects your perception of pain?
To a degree, I think that when I'm doing the keto diet or the 5-2 diet, there's a deeper shift in energy levels, and for me that is like allows for more positivity,
Yeah.
which
Okay.
is
Yeah.
affecting my pain.
Oh, that's a very interesting point. Yes. Sort of mood and pain perception are very closely connected.
Yeah. But I haven't gone as deep as Karim in trying to find the specific causes of inflammation, which I think is amazing. Yeah.
But again, that, for some people that will be really effective, depending on psychology. I've never particularly gone down that route because I can be so obsessive. So with my temperament, for me, just eating a good, normal, healthy diet, that's a really good practice for me, rather than getting into doing anything too extreme, because that's not good for my psychology. So that's also just very interesting. Although, there over the years I have like gluten and sugar, I know, well, they just have a really bad effect on my guts, to be honest. I get noxious wind very, very quickly, which is interesting. So it's like as soon as it even goes into my mouth, there's obviously some message that goes down to my bowel to produce noxious gas, which so it's quite good actually socially, because it means I definitely never have sugar and gluten when I'm out, because it's so unpleasant for everyone else. So
yeah, for me,
sort of
one thing I noticed is that bread, and it took me ages to realize this, honestly, given how obvious it is to me now. This is going back probably 10 years longer now that I'm realizing how old I am, to my early 20s, when I'd be working at a desk and I'd have I think I was being healthy by having some soup and just like a little bread bun or something. And then I'd be just completely knackered the whole afternoon.
Yeah.
And it's as soon as I eat bread, any bread or pasta, anything flour based. And I'm not, I don't have celiac disease or anything like that. It just literally puts me to sleep.
That's interesting. Yeah, I used to have these terrible after lunch slumps, and I'm certain it was gluten, because since I cut that out, I haven't had my big after lunch crashes.
Interesting. Mine was meat. Meat did the same thing to me. I find that not having meat in the system, I think the amount of energy that's required to break it down, similar to the carbs as well, but just energy levels right back up once the meat was cut back. So that's
good. Good.
See,
Well, sorry.
I've been pescatarian since I was probably 18, 19, and I always wonder if I ate meat, would it like just sort me out energy wise, because my energy is naturally quite lower than other people's, I would say. So that's like One of those things I'll never know.
Well, you could
The
give it
other
a
thing, the
go.
other thing to look at is blood type, right? I mean, that's a whole nother area, and the fact that different food types interact very, very differently with different blood types. So, and it's interesting, the emergence of blood types in our evolution. You know, O is the original, and O is the hunter-gatherer blood type, and it's only after we started to settle, farm, produce crops, eat crops, that other blood types started to emerge. So some really interesting stuff on blood types as well.
Yeah, so I'm just aware that we'll need to bring this to a close now, but lots for people to explore. And yeah, it's a very, I know in science it's a very emerging field. Also, the fact that it's very individualized nutrition, which is interesting. And I think it's the Zoe app, the Zoe study. They're really looking at that. People want to, Professor Tim Spector.
Yeah.
On that. Okay, good. So thank you both very, very much. That was fascinating. And I'm sure it'll be very interesting for listeners and viewers. Yeah.